that clause speaks to the increase in penalty for the offense of unlawful possession of a firearm or ammunition to imprisonment for not less than 10 years and not more than 20 years on summary conviction, and to imprisonment for not less than 20 years and not more than 40 years on conviction on indictment. C, provides an exception where a person may have in his or her possession a firearm or ammunition for the purpose of surrendering that firearm or ammunition on behalf of another person during a firearm amnesty declared pursuant to Section 51A of the Act. So when an amnesty is issued by the government, when that happens, they can get exemption for such purposes. Again, important. D sets out the specific circumstances under which a person will be deemed to be in possession of a firearm or ammunition for the purpose of an offense under the section. Clause 17, Mr. Speaker, amends Section 21 of the Principal Act to increase the penalty for the offense of contravening the general restrictions upon carrying a firearm and ammunition in a public place to a fine of not less than $50,000 and not more than $100,000, and to imprisonment for not less than 5 years, not more than 10 years. So this one deals with contravening the act in respect of carrying a firearm in a public place. Clause 18, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the offense of contravening its special restrictions upon carrying firearm and ammunition in a public place to a fine of not less than $50,000 and not more than $100,000, and to imprisonment for not less than 5 years and not more than 10 years on summary conviction, and to a fine of not less than $100,000, not more than $250,000, and to imprisonment for not less than 10 years and not more than 20 years on conviction on indictment. Clause 19. Clause 19, Mr. Speaker, treats with the discharging of a firearm in a public place, the offense of discharging a firearm in a public place. And, Mr. Speaker, within a distance of 40 yards of any public road or in any public place, 40 yards. And the fine again, Mr. Speaker, $50,000. Clause 20. Clause 20 speaks to the offense of possessing firearm or ammunition with intent to injure. And this speaks to imprisonment for not less than 10 years and not more than 20 years. Clause 21. Clause 21, Mr. Speaker, seeks to amend Section 25 of the Principal Act to increase the penalty for the offense of A, possession with intent to commit or to aid the commission of an indictable offense, or to resist or prevent the lawful apprehension or detention of a person, to imprisonment for not less than 15 years, not more than 40 years, on conviction on indictment. Again, Mr. Speaker, very, very important. Possession of a firearm, B, speaks to the possession of a firearm or ammunition belonging to the government, to imprisonment for not less than 5 years and not more than 10 years on summary conviction and to imprisonment for not less than 10 years and not more than 20 years. Clause 22, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the offense of using a firearm or ammunition in contravention to the terms and conditions of a license or certificate or permit as issued under this Act. Clause 23 speaks to the offense of failing without a lawful excuse to comply with a notice under Section 35 to a fine of $3,000 or imprisonment for 6 months. 24 speaks to the offense of failing without a lawful excuse to comply with a notice. Clause 25, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the offense of failing to report the loss of a firearm or ammunition. A fine again, Mr. Speaker, $50,000. Clause 26 speaks to the offense of failing to stop a vehicle at the request of a police officer, preventing or intimidating the driver of such a vehicle from stopping or escaping or attempting to escape from such a vehicle, to a fine of not less than $50,000. Again, Mr. Speaker, this particular clause, clause 26, is very important and very instrumental in the reduction of these firearms. Clause 27 speaks to the offense. I'm going to finish shortly. Thanks for, the offense of failing to comply with the requirements pertaining to custody of a firearm and ammunition. Clause 28, Mr. Speaker, amends Section 53 of the Principal Act to increase the general penalties for all offenses under the Act. Mr. Speaker, I took the time to go through these clauses within 29 minutes. I have 1 more minute to say, because I want the general public, and especially our young men who trade in these weapons, to understand the serious implications of passing this bill here today, and the reason why they should surrender these weapons, utilize the balance of this amnesty that is remaining, and turn away from a life of crime. I want to say in this honorable House, Mr. Speaker, that if you're hooked on crime, there is help. You can walk into the Ministry of Social and Community Development at the Botanical Gardens. There are many counselors there who can speak to you in confidence. Walk into the Ministry of Youth. Speak to the technocrats in the ministry and come up with something that is, and they will help you to come up with something that is viable and useful as a career, and turn away from a life of crime. Mr. Speaker, in the last few seconds that remain, I want to say to our young men, in particular, every single one of us who sit at this table, every young man who sits here, I'm not young again, used to be, had a choice, every single one of them, have a choice to either turn to something that is useful and beneficial to the country, or a life of crime. They had a choice. They chose to make a valuable contribution to nation building. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to end by calling on our young men, please, put down your weapons. Turn away from crime. There is help at the ministry. There is help in the church. Turn away. Walk into the church. Walk into people that can help you. I am willing to help you. We are willing to help you. And I make this solemn call because, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to see our young men in prison. The prison is already overpopulated. I don't want to see that. We don't want to see that. We want our young men to contribute to nation building. Thank you Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Leader of Government Business. And I see MP for St. Andrew Northwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pleasant good morning to everyone. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my voice in support of the Firearms Amendment Number 2 Bill 2024. Mr. Speaker, by introducing stricter penalties for a wide range of firearms-related offenses, the bill seeks to deter illegal possession, trafficking, and use of firearms. Mr. Speaker, the mandatory minimum sentence for various offenses, particularly the harsher penalties for automatic firearms, underscores government's commitment to curbing the proliferation of dangerous weapons and addressing severe impact of gun violence in our communities. These amendments aim to create strong legal framework that not only punishes offenders, but also serves as a robust deterrent against future violations. Mr. Speaker, this amendment is anticipated
Please join me in saying the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Pray be seated.
Item 3, oath or affirmation of a new senator.
Senator Mariana Charles.
I, Mariana Charles, do swear that I will faithfully bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III, his heirs and successors according to the law. So help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
Item 4, announcements by Madam President.
Honorable members, it is my sad duty to announce the passing of our former Senator, the Honorable Alan Maguire. That Senator, the Honorable Nolan Cox, sends his regrets, is unable to attend this Honorable House this morning. He also sends his condolences to the family.
Announcements by Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, like the President, I regret to announce the death of a former member of the House of Representatives and also a former member of the Senate, the late Clarence Richard Rapier. We extend our deepest sympathies and condolences to the members of the family in this very difficult period. I also wish to say to this Honorable House that a number of members from the House of Representatives are absent today, namely Honorable Ron Redhead, who is sick, Honorable Joseph Andal, who is also unwell, and Honorable Kirin James, who is out of the island on state business. They all have sent their condolences to the family of Lady Williams, especially, and the family of the other two MPs that have died, and they expressed their regret of not being here to be part of this very special ceremony. Honorable members, I ask you to join us as we stand and observe 1 minute silence in honor of our fallen comrades.
Pursuant to Standing Order Number 12 of the House of Representatives and Standing Order Number 10 of the Senate, the special joint sitting has been summoned to celebrate the life of the late His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams, former Governor General, who passed away on October 2nd, 2024.
Item 5, motions.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to honorable members of this joint sitting. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas former Governor General, His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams, Knight Grand Cross of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George, and Queen's Counsel, passed away on October 2nd, 2024. And whereas His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams served as a parliamentarian representing the constituency of St. David and was a Minister of Government from 1984 to 1989. And whereas His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams served the state of Grenada as Governor General from 1996 to 2008 with unwavering dedication and a well-formed disposition of integrity. And whereas His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams was an exceptional leader and an outstanding gatekeeper of the public interest, steadfastly upholding the values of democracy, justice, and good governance. And whereas His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams was a paragon of virtue whose contributions far surpassed the ceremonial role of his office, tirelessly promoting unity and stability in the interests of the state of Grenada. And whereas the members of the Senate and of the House of Representatives assembled at a special sitting of both houses of Parliament are desirous of honoring and paying their respects to the late Sir Daniel Williams for his esteemed public service, for nurturing the highest principles and practices while in the service of the state of Grenada. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament held at Mount Wheldale, St. George, this 15th day of October 2024, hereby recognize the substantial contributions made by His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams as a resolute Governor General and as an exemplar of erudite principles respected and acknowledged throughout Grenada, regionally and extra-regionally. And be it further resolved that the special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament of Grenada express profound sympathy to the family, relatives, and friends of His Excellency, Sir Daniel Williams, and honor him for his humbled and distinguished service to the state of Grenada.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. You have His Majesty Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I take this with a deep sense of honor to second the motion as presented by the Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Leader of His Majesty Opposition.
Senator Leader, Senator Dwight Horsford, after Senator, Senator Adrian Thomas is absent, and Senator David Andrew, you will start. Thank you. Senator Andrew, you have the floor, sir.
Madam President, I rise today to associate the Senate with the sentiments of the motion as moved by the Honorable Prime Minister.
I thank you, Senator David Andrew. Senator Dwight Horsford.
Madam President, I rise to associate the opposition in the Senate with the sentiments and the motion as accepted by the Leader of Government's Business.
Thank you, Senator Horsford.
Honorable members, the question is, whereas former Governor General, His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams, Knight Grand Cross of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George, and Queen's Counsel passed away on October 2nd, 2024. And whereas His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams served as a parliamentarian representing the constituency of St. David and was a Minister of Government from 1984 to 1989. And whereas His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams served the state of Grenada as Governor General from 1996 to 2008 with unwavering dedication and a well-formed disposition of integrity. And whereas His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams was an exceptional leader and outstanding gatekeeper of the public interest, steadfastly upholding the values of democracy, justice, and good governance. And whereas His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams was a paragon of virtue whose contribution far surpassed the ceremonial role of his office, tirelessly promoting unity, stability in the interests of the state of Grenada. And whereas the members of the Senate and of the House of Representatives assembled at a special sitting of both houses of Parliament are desirous of honoring and paying their respects to the late Sir Daniel Williams for his esteemed public service, for nurturing the highest principles and practices while in the service of the state of Grenada. Now therefore be it resolved that this special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament held at Mount Wheldale, St. George, this 15th day of October 2024, hereby recognize the substantial contributions made by His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams as a resolute Governor General and an exemplar of erudite principles, respected and acknowledged throughout Grenada, regionally and extra-regionally. And be it further resolved that the special sitting of the Houses of Parliament of Grenada express profound sympathy to the family, relatives, and friends of His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams and honor him for his humbled and distinguished service to the state of Grenada.
Honorable members of the Senate, and let me pause to welcome you, Senator Charles. Welcome to the Senate. It is my pleasure to present the question to you, Senators, as follows. Be it resolved that this special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament held at Mount Wheldale, St. George's, this 15th day of October 2024, hereby recognize the substantial contributions made by His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams as a resolute Governor General and an exemplar of erudite principles, respected and acknowledged throughout Grenada, regionally and extra-regionally. And be it finally resolved that the special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament of Grenada express profound sympathy to the family, to the relatives, and the friends of His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams, and honor him for his humble and distinguished service to the state of Grenada.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I seek leave to speak on the motion, and in doing so, I wish to start, Mr. Speaker, by acknowledging the presence of Lady Williams, the children, grandchildren, and extended family of the late Sir Daniel Williams. And though I've done so privately, I take the opportunity to publicly and on the record express my personal condolences to Lady Williams, the children of the late Sir Daniel Williams, to his grandchildren and his extended family. I also express condolences on behalf of my own family, because as long as I've been alive, the name Danny and later Sir Daniel has always resonated within my household, starting with my grandmother. Danny, Sir Daniel Williams, is probably as well known a citizen of the parish of St. David as any citizen that you can find. And though the motion speaks to his time as parliamentarian and Minister of Government and his time as Governor General, with your leave, Mr. Speaker, I wish to speak a little bit to my own knowledge of his time as a lawyer, as a family man, as a community man, and as a public servant. And I can think of no better legacy than his foundation for needy students, which he set up and which I know firsthand Daniel in particular has continued to champion. That foundation, Mr. Speaker, is representative of Sir Daniel's commitment to public service, to helping those in need, and to seeing education as a tool for ensuring that young men and women, particularly those who are economically disadvantaged, could get an opportunity to raise themselves and their families to better circumstances. So Daniel always conducted himself with calm, with grace, and with elegance. I do not recall ever once seeing him angry. I assume as a human being he must have been, but he certainly never, as far as my limited time on earth, and as far as my recollection, ever publicly displayed anger. So he represented himself, he represented his family, he represented the parish of St. David with dignity. And it is not always easy to do so when doing so in public life. And particularly at the time when he entered public life in 1984. Grenada was coming out of perhaps one of its darkest periods and a period of great instability, politically and socially. And so his offering himself to serve at that time, already having had a law practice, is testimony to the fact that he was prepared to move from his comfort zone into the uncomfortable, into the limelight, and into public service on behalf of the citizens of St. David, the citizens of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, and the citizens of the region. And so he set a perfect example for many to follow, including myself. I therefore want to thank Lady Williams and her family for allowing him to do so, for supporting him throughout the period that he did so, because I am under no illusion that without the support of Lady Williams and the family, his decision and his success at the decision would have been a lot more difficult. So Daniel served for a long period as Governor General, and during difficult times as well. But he brought, despite the fact that he came from a political background, as the motion says, integrity to the office. And we therefore are clear that the motion accurately depicts his time and his service to the office of Governor General. And it is not always easy to do if one comes from a political partisan background and then assumes the highest office in the state of Grenada. But he did so exemplary, and therefore he raised the bar as to what one should expect when serving as Governor General of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. So Daniel's law firm was located almost in boundary with the law firm that I practice on Lucas Street. And although by the time I was practicing, he was clearly in public service and not necessarily practicing, from time to time, I would see him visiting the office. And I would have the opportunity to meet him either in the garage when he was coming out of the vehicle or when he was simply walking on Lucas Street to be able to speak and converse with him. And he always had a word of counsel or two, both in terms of the law, but more importantly, in terms of one's relationship with the wider community and the clients that we served. I therefore quite understand why Daniela and other members of the family have been able to continue the legacy that he left with the law firm, because it is clearly because of the foundation that he built that they've been able to continue to carry on the legacy of the practice of law. But above all, in my interactions with Sir Daniel, he was a community man. Many of us, particularly if we come from rural villages, strive to leave our rural villages, strive to distinguish ourselves by distancing ourselves from where we came from. So Daniel did the very opposite. He always anchored in St. David. He was always part of the community, and he always gave back to the community. So whether it's the form of investing in St. David by building buildings, everyone knows St. David's doesn't have a tongue. There's no urban center. But Sir Daniel did his part in contributing to making sure that we had the infrastructure within St. David that could house basic necessities like pharmacies, etc., that is so badly needed by the citizens of St. David. He resided in St. David, and we knew that after Hurricane Ivan destroyed the official residence of the Governor General, he resided at his residence. He could have chosen to go elsewhere, but again, he demonstrated his commitment to St. David and his commitment to anchoring in the community. I know firsthand that Sir Daniel prized his library, and it is perhaps a reflection that he understood the importance of reading, reading, and reading, because that is really the only way in which we can acquire the knowledge, the understanding, and the wisdom that we all need to be able to navigate this complex world. And so I know for sure that Lady Williams and the family will continue to nurture that spirit of reading, nurture that spirit of knowledge, and nurture that spirit of ensuring that his foundation continues to succeed. I will conclude by saying he was also anchored in his faith and played a pivotal and leadership role in his church. And again, he could have spent time at larger and bigger churches, but he became a stable at the small Piti Bakai church in St. David. And I understand why that was a stable, because if you go to that church, the singing always takes you to soaring heights. And so Daniel was an instrumental part of the church and the church community in St. David. So, Mr. Speaker, naturally there are others here who could speak in far more detail to Sir Daniel's political life and his life as Governor General. So I speak merely as a citizen of St. David, as someone who Sir Daniel opened the doors for by being a trailblazer and by letting a young boy from Petite Esperance in St. David know that there is no limit to success or achievement except those that you impose on yourself. He has clearly been a trailblazer. He's clearly set the example for me and many others to follow. And in that way, he planted a tree knowing that he may not get the chance to sit beneath the shade of the tree, but that others will do so. And that, Mr. Speaker, in my mind, is a neat way of describing the life, the work, and the legacy of Sir Daniel. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. And I now invite the Leader of His Majesty Opposition to make his contribution.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And of course, as I said earlier on, I'm honored to have the opportunity to share my own feelings and, of course, be part of this important joint session of this Honorable House. I do want to make the point, Mr. Speaker, that I thought that the wording of the motion was extremely appropriate in describing the person whom we're honoring here today. Sometimes when someone passes on, you hear tributes and statements which do not always appear to be consistent with the life or all aspects of the life of individuals. But this motion, Mr. Speaker, and I do want to compliment those who constructed it, does in fact speak to the quality of the person that we have honoring here today. So, let me first recognize my good friend, Lady Williams and her daughters and children and grandchildren and family members who are here this morning, being part and witnessing this special joint session of this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, just as a little pick-on here, sometimes I looked over on the other side. I thought maybe I should be on the other side because they look more spacious than the room that I was given here this morning, Mr. Speaker. So next time, please, if there is an opportunity, give me a little more space. Mr. Speaker and honorable members of this House, for me, this is not about a tribute to some past parliamentarian. It's much deeper than that because of the relationship, the personal relationship that I had the opportunity to receive, to share with this distinguished Grenadian patriot and son. Mr. Speaker, in 1984, when I returned to Grenada from Washington, I heard about the name Danny Williams, but I did not know the individual. And must be recalled, and I do hope I'm giving that leverage here this morning because of the extent of the personal relation and connection that we've had, that obviously no other member of this House would have had the opportunity to share in that way. And it was a time of chaos in the country, political chaos. And there were three political parties at the time. The Grenada National Party headed by Herbert Blaise, the National Democratic Party headed by George Brezan, and of course the Grenada Democratic Movement, of which I was a member of and the past leader of the National Democratic Congress, Tillman Thomas was also a member of, and headed by Dr. Francis Alexis. And in being advised that the parties then should get together in a time of political chaos in contesting the general election in December 1984, there was agreement that we should unite. And therefore, each party submitted 3 names of persons that should meet to decide on the candidates going forward in the general elections of 1984. And at that session at Knox House, Mr. Speaker and distinguished members, the candidates for the elections were decided. Details I would not go through here. But in the choice of the elections, the person whom we wanted to, had agreed to support by all the parties to run in the St. David's constituency did not accept to run there. And therefore, the parties had to decide, since that person was also a leader of one of the parties in the discussion. So a delegation was chosen to look for alternative. I can't remember exactly the combination of that delegation, but I know they met and decided that Sir Daniel would be the best person. And when they returned to us, they indicated that Sir Daniel clearly did not want to be a candidate. He's always recognized his role as a patriotic citizen and would do anything for his country, but he did not. He was a reluctant suitor in the political process at the time. But given his passion for his country, he could not turn them down after a lot of pleading. But he made it very clear to the team that it's one term. Does not matter what happens afterwards, it's one term. And then, so Danny, as I call him, is a very quiet man, with very quiet disposition, but when he spoke and when he decided on something, you do not shift him easily. So even after that period of the first term ended and he was approached, he said, "You remember, I gave my word." So one term, and that was it. So the election in December 3rd, 1984, as you recall, the NNP won 14 out of the 15 seats. St. Andrews Northeast was the only seat that did not go in the NNP column at that time. Danny was then made Minister of Health, and I think it would be recognized that there was a tremendous amount of progress in the health ministry in this time. And during that time, because of his service and his relationship with the staff over that particular period. But something of note, before Danny took the oath of office as a minister of government, he told us in a session before the oath was taken It was known that he had retainers in several firms and banks in the country, one of the leading lawyers. Some powerful retainers giving him serious resources. He was also the lawyer for the Catholic Church. He made it clear that he was going to resign and give up all the retainers at all the banks and businesses that he served. A tremendous sacrifice. A tremendous sacrifice. And that tells you, Mr. Speaker, and distinguished members here, the quality or the personality of this patriotic Grenadian. Mr. Speaker, the government continued in office from 1984. In 1987, the first split of the new National Party occurred when George resigned and some of the members decided to leave the government and formed what is now the National Democratic Congress. Mr. Speaker, I know Danny met with George Vezan because they were very, very close. I did everything to counsel him against leaving and against forming a new political party. Maybe if they had heeded the advice, Prime Minister and my colleagues would not necessarily be here today as leader of the National Democratic Congress. But George did not heed his advice at that time. Mr. Speaker, the sense of humor is important in this, although we're talking about the life of this great man. Mr. Speaker, in 1989, there was also a further split of the government. And I was then fired from the government of the day. And I recall then Danny, who stood for democracy within the organization. When that split occurred, and he was asked to remain in the government, while the NNP was literally thrown out of government. He said on principle that he could not, as a Democrat, support this. And while he was a very close confidant and supporter of the then Prime Minister, he said that he could not in conscience, in principle, go against what he perceived to be democratic activity. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it would be known, and maybe for the first time many members hearing, because Danny is a person that do not really speak a lot about these matters. He was offered substantial sums to remain in the government. And he said, he's not for sale. That was the quality of the person that we are talking about today. Mr. Speaker, the 1990 general elections came, and the NNP won 2 seats out of the 15 seats. Danny campaigned and did what he could and what he thought he had to do in supporting the new National Party. And after the election, in the attempt to restructure and organize the new National Party, he again reluctantly agreed to sign on as deputy political leader of the new National Party. That was not, clearly we had to nudge him and indicate that the necessity for the survival of the NNP needed people like himself. And I must say also, Mr. Speaker, Dr. John Watts was also a key person who was supporting Danny in that respect. And it will be remembered also, for those many of you here who probably do not know, John Watts was the man who formed the Grenada National Party and formed the Grenada National Party that Hubert Blazer led. And he was the person that backed and supported Hubert Blazer to become the first leader of the Grenada National Party. So that's for the history of many members here that do not know this. So because of that support and his commitment over the years, the new National Party in 5 years became victorious in the general elections in 1995, winning 8 of the 15 seats after just winning just 2 seats in the general elections in 1990. Then his commitment and support and advice over the years were essential in that success, Mr. Speaker. So, in 1996, Mr. Speaker, then he was appointed, as recommended, of the Governor General of this country. And I mean no reason to get at anyone, a person or group, but to say it was unfortunate at the time, the opposition party at the time condemned the appointment and literally vilified what I consider to be a Grenadian patriot, a humble and a man of integrity. And the claim was, Mr. Speaker, that he was a politician and therefore should not have been appointed as Governor General of the country. The quality of the person, the integrity of the person was not given the kind of importance that it should have had. And we had so many periods in this country, in the Caribbean, where persons had been in politics but served as president and Governor General of so many other countries. I do really want this to be taken in the context of what we are talking about today and not personal, Mr. Speaker. If I did not say it, then that means I'll be dishonest with myself in a very special situation like this. Mr. Speaker, I probably would not be standing here today had it not been for the quiet and advice and support that Danny has given me over the years. You know, something that always touched me about the person that we're honoring here today is that none of us is perfect. We're all subject to errors and so on. But Danny, when he has to remind you of something that you're doing or planning to do that's not in the best interest, when he calls you and he's speaking to you, you start feeling that it's something nice he's going to tell you, because he has a way of telling you, well, you're not doing bad, you're doing all right. But, and then he goes down to the but. Clear, precise, and to the point. You could not miss it. In other words, if you want to be mad with that sort of thing, you have to be mad with yourself. Because he made you feel good. But then the lashes came afterwards. In fact, that's how my mother used to scold us, and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, the 2008 elections came, and the National Democratic Congress became victorious. Again, we saw the quality of Sir Daniel Williams. And I know that he called the Prime Minister-elect and to inform him the government has changed, and therefore he's offering his resignation as Governor General of the country. The principle of the man, what he stood for. As he told me, the then Prime Minister indicated that He understood what he was doing, but he wanted him to remain for a couple of months to see to it that the throne speech is delivered before he demits office of the Governor General. Sir Daniel Williams demitted office after the throne speech, not long afterwards. In effect, Mr. Speaker, we are talking about someone today that has been selfless in many, many respects, who stood for principle. Principle. Whether it's about giving up the retainers of his office, of what he had before, or whether it was remaining in the office of Governor General, or whether it was times when he could have satisfied the status quo. He put principle ahead of everything else and stood for what he perceived. He's not never said to you that he was absolutely right. That was his perception, and that's what it's all about. Perception was he was doing what his conscience dictated that he must do. And there's some aspects, the Prime Minister referred to this to some extent. But I remember Sir Daniel built an extension to his home. It's a place for activities and for social gathering. And there were so many organizations that held fundraising events at that place. And I asked many times, did you get fees? And he would not take fees. And what was sad, Mr. Speaker and colleagues all here today, when he was being vilified on several times during his life, some of the same organization never stood in his defense, never came out and said a word. And one day I sat to them and said, did this person or did this group come out and say something on your behalf because of what you are going through? And he said to me, no. He said, well, that's their choice. He was as cool as cucumber. This is the man. In other words, what people do, that's for them. I can only owe it to myself and my God. But I do want to make one further point before I sit. The National Democratic Congress nominated Sir Carlisle Glynn as the Governor General after Sir Carlisle Glynn, like Sir Danny, participated in active politics. In other words, by the action of the National Democratic Congress then, when Danny was appointed, the NNP should have and should follow suit and attack that nomination. But friends, let me say this, and it's not just a call. Danny called me and he said to me, Keith, I hope you do not do the same thing that was done to me. And I said, Danny, I've already made up my mind. I know Sir Carlisle Glynn was a good man. I know he was a decent man. When the appointment was made, there's no way I would stand and criticize that appointment. In other words, I will not follow suit. But the key thing is that Danny called me. He wanted to ensure that I did not and I would not go down that road. Again, my friends, demonstrating the quality of the human being that we are now honoring today. That I'm proud. I'm proud at the opportunity to know him. I'm proud Mr. Speaker, we've lost a great Grenadian son. I'm sorry. I beg your indulgence. Lady Williams and your family, they have given us a lot. I want to thank you for what you have given me as a person and to your country, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader of His Majesty Opposition. I understand the moment. I want to say to the rest of the House, we are going to continue on this side, and then when we finish, the President will take over for this side of the House. So I now invite the Honorable MP for St. Andrew Northwest to make a contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to express my deepest sympathy to Lady Williams, the children, grandchildren, and the extended family of Sir Danny Williams. Sir Danny Williams' life to public service has been one of example for every one of us, and so we know as the family you will miss him, but may you find comfort in the life he lived, in the work he has done for the people of Grenada, Carrick, Wampidi, Martinique. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. Andrew Northwest. I sent is the Honorable MP for St. George Southeast.
Good morning to this honorable House. I recognize Lady Williams' children and grandchildren, and I express my deepest sympathies to you and the entire family. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youth grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. I offer strength to you, Lady Williams, the entire family, at this very sad moment. No one gets accustomed to losing a loved one. Even the strongest amongst us break in times like these. But let us use these moments to reflect upon the positives, upon the contributions that he's made to community, the contributions to family, the contribution to nation. We want to say thanks to you, Lady Williams, and to the children and grandchildren for lending us Sir Daniel Williams for those many years. We recognize the selfless sacrifice that was made, and we offer our thanks and appreciation back to you and the entire family. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. George Southeast. Honorable MP for St. Andrews South West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to express my deepest sympathy on the passing of an exemplary son that our country would have produced. Mr. Speaker, in my early years of formation, I always read about outstanding personalities, great human beings. So I read a lot about Aristotle, Plato, Adam Smith, John Maynard Keynes, Fidel Castro, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Karl Marx, Federico Engels, and I found in my reading, Mr. Speaker, sir, that all these great human beings, they became great. They became great, and they were respected and admired worldwide because of their merits, exclusively because of their work. And so, Mr. Speaker, philosophy speaks about two kinds of personalities. Philosophy speaks about the historic personality and the relevant personalities of history. Some of us come to this world, we live, we may do something outstanding, but to know about us, you have to read about us in the history books. We're historic. Others come to this space, and because of the merits, because of their work, they never die. They live forever. We speak about them in our daily lives. We celebrate and we try to follow and emulate the work and the example. They have only physically disappeared. They are relevant. They are relevant personalities of history. They never die. But, Mr. Speaker, I also share the view that the greatest merit that one can achieve is to be at the service of his country and of his people. What makes you relevant is your work in serving your country and your people. Whether it is an outstanding feat that you carry out, or whether you were in a certain position that allowed you to serve. So great men are men, let me just correct myself, great men and women are men and women who visit and spend some time on this planet, not for themselves, but they do so to serve country, to serve people, and to serve humanity. And Mr. Speaker, sir, when I read the preamble to the motion here today, I can safely say, with satisfaction, that Sir Daniel Williams was a man who served his country and served his people with distinction. And therefore, the people of this great area would consider him not just a historic personality of our history, but a relevant personality of our history. And if I were to emulate him, if I were to follow in his footsteps, the best that I can do, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that I serve my country and my people with respect, with dignity, and with honor. And so, Mr. Speaker, I pray that having produced an outstanding personality, a relevant personality of history, I pray that all of us and those to come would cherish his memories, would cherish his work, and would want to emulate him and follow his example in being of service to our country and to our people. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. Andrew Southwest. And I now invite the MP for St. Patrick East to make his contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to every member of this Honorable House. I stand in support of the motion to celebrate the life of the late Sir Daniel Williams and to simply say that I am elated and happy to be here and be part of this historic occasion. Lady Williams, your kids and grandkids and extended family, I wish to take this opportunity on behalf of the people of the St. Patrick East constituency to express our condolences and sympathy for what you're going through right now. I think it's honorable to be part of something that is just, and despite I didn't know Sir Daniel Williams very well because I know as a public servant back in the mid-90s when he became Governor General, I was part of the Ministry of Finance as a public servant. And if one thing I recall back then is that having participated in purchasing a property from the government of Grenada then, he was the signature on my deed. And therefore, I always remember that. So I do not want to basically go out of the way and basically try to compete with all the illustrious presentations that was made before me, because I can't consider Sir Daniel Williams to the extent where I can comment about his personal life. What I do want to say, though, is this. I believe he has done a great deal on this earth, and thank you for lending us Sir Daniel Williams, and to say to you, I'm honored to be part of this celebration. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. Patrick East. And is it the MP for St. Andrew Northeast?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you,
please make a contribution, Honorable MP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too join with the rest of the members of the House to express deepest condolences to the family, Lady Williams and family, on the passing of our former Governor General, Sir Daniel Williams. I remember Sir Daniel Williams for his calmness,
his grace and his humility. And the service he provided to our country embodies integrity. And it is very sad today that we are here to mourn his passing, but I do want to encourage us to remember him for the impact, the positive impact his life would have left on our country, Grenada. So to the family, I say thank you for giving Sir Daniel Williams to us, for his contribution and all that he has done, the indelible mark he has left on our country. And I do express again my deepest condolences. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. Andrew Northeast. And I now invite the MP for the town of St. George.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to join others in associating myself with the... Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. I want to join others in associating myself with the sentiments expressed in the motion. I want to, on behalf of my family, because my family knew Sir Danny quite well and Lady Williams, I want to express my condolences on their behalf for Sir Daniel Williams. Sir Daniel, I'm certain, would not have achieved all of what he did without the solid support of Lady Williams and the family. So on their behalf, on my family's behalf, I want to express deepest condolences. I want to say that I knew Sir Danny not in a political way. In fact, he did represent my father many years ago. My father used him as an attorney. I did use him as an attorney many years ago. So I got to know Sir Danny, not as well as others, the political leader and leader of the opposition. I mean, leader of the government, sorry, and the leader of the opposition, but certainly I got to know him well. And I describe him as calm, kind, focused, and loving people. In fact, when I went to visit Lady Williams, she spoke about Sir Danny always liking people around. And then I went to the wake on the third night, and I've never been to a wake like that. Two things stood out for me: the amount of people that was there, and the fact that it was nearly a full church service conducted on Sir Danny's behalf. It meant him being deeply rooted in his faith, which I saw on that third night, and deeply rooted in his community. But then I should know that, because when I went to study in London, after I met Sir Danny, I stayed in a place in South London on Davenport Road. And the lady who I was renting the room from, because I was studying law, said that she loved Sir Danny. And I said, how did you know him? She said he lived right here in the same place I was living. So I had the honor of being in London where Sir Danny studied, and being in the room and the house and with the landlady that Sir Danny shared. So I feel this affinity to Sir Danny. So Lady Williams, I won't be long. I just want to say on our behalf, on behalf of the people of the town of St. George, we've lost a good soul, but the good thing is that you were able to spend those last days with him, and in speaking with you, I felt a sense that you are comforted still in the fact that he lived a full life. He lived the life he wanted to be, and that there are many people, not in St. David's alone, as the member for St. David's said, but throughout this country, who remembers Sir Danny very fondly. Kind, calm, focused, lover of people. Thank you. May God bless you all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you to Honorable MP for Town of St. George. Honorable MP for St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, I beg your indulgence to address the family of the late Sir Daniel Williams, to express my condolences to them. I see our Lady Williams and family and friends and well-wishers, and I am aware that there might be listeners further afield through whatever media who are listening, and I want to extend condolences to them. And
in particular the people of St. David's, whom he loved very much and who loved him, and also to express thanks to the family of Sir Daniel Williams, not just for allowing him to do so much that he did for his constituency and Grenada as a whole, but for supporting him. I know Lady Williams was always there, and I always admired from a distance the partnership that I saw with these two people, Sir Daniel Williams and Lady Williams, and of course the family. So I'm aware that he had strong support from his family. Mr. Speaker, I want to join and to echo the sentiments of the motion as expressed earlier, and to also echo the sentiments of our political leader in his compliments for the words expressed in the motion, which was so appropriate, even though I feel that they do not do quite justice, because sometimes words cannot do justice to an exemplary character, but it is a great attempt to try to encapsulate in a few words the personality, the character, and the contributions that Sir Daniel Williams made. So I'll just beg your indulgence to note some of the words: exceptional leader, outstanding gatekeeper of the public interest, and how he worked tirelessly in promoting unity and stability, and so on and so on. Others would have heard, but I want to associate myself with the sentiments of those. I also want to take this opportunity to speak a little bit on Sir Daniel Williams. Can't claim knowing him as much as the political leader of the opposition would have expressed, but I had the opportunity to meet him several times, and he leaves a mark on you with his demeanor, his quietness, his calm gestures. And even though he was calm and quiet, one could not mistake the authority in the man, the quiet strength that he exuded. And it reminds me of something that a famous writer would have said. I don't know if it's one of the philosophies that my friend earlier mentioned, one of the philosophers, because maybe it's one of them, and later on we'll talk to see if it was one of those great philosophers. But he said, lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. You know, when there are footprints on sand, we live in a coastal country, the waves come and they quickly erase those footprints. But when people leave, like Sir Daniel Williams, the footprints he has left are indelible, and they will stay with us forever. So I knew him as a quiet man, as everybody did, but he had a firmness of purpose. He spoke with authority, and he commanded that we listen to him. And he gave great counsel, very wise counsel. He was always watching, always listening. So when we spoke in Parliament, afterwards he did make very guided comments as to how, whether we did well. He may not say we didn't do well. He might say, you could have embellished a little bit more, or whatever. He was that kind of person, and we always respected his input, ready to give advice, a great counselor in profession and a great counselor in terms of how he dealt with us as younger politicians and parliamentarians. One of the lessons I will never forget is, I call it the Good Samaritan lesson, or going the extra mile. And one day we sat together and he said to me, as a person and as a Christian, we have to, and as a politician, you have to be prepared to go the extra mile. And he said to me, if you're going, and I don't remember the locations that he used, but he said, for example, if you go into the police station in St. David's, and he used St. David's as an example, you're going, you're traveling to, let's say, to your home, which is near to the secondary school in St. David's, and somebody asks you for a ride, and you stop. and then when the person is in the car, you realize the person going up by the police station. You could tell the person, look, this is my home, I'm dropping you here. And these were his words. Or you can say, all right, so where are you going? You're going to the police station? It's okay, it's not too far. I'll take you there. Going the extra mile. And I have never forgotten that. I may not have practiced it all the time, but I am guided by those words. Go the extra mile. And those were the words that he said to me that I remember. On a lighter side, I mentioned the partnership of Sir Daniel and Lady Williams. Every time I see these two people together, and we used to have a lot of socials, the partnership in dancing, they were excellent on the floor. And it was exemplary of the kind of life they live. These people got together, they did a foundation to take care of needy children, and I want to compliment that partnership and the family support for doing that. And so many other things that Lady Williams allowed him to do for the community and to share his time. I want to compliment Lady Williams and the family and the exemplary life they live. It's not just a page we have to take from to follow, but they leave a whole book behind. He leaves a whole book behind for us to follow, as politicians, as human beings, as Christians. May God rest his soul.
Thank you, MP for St. Mark. Thank you very much. And I now invite the MP for St. Andrews Southeast to make a contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Madam President. I rise this morning to associate myself with the sentiment of the motion as presented by Honorable Prime Minister, and of course the very touching, emotional, historical presentation presented by Leader of His Majesty's Opposition. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to extend deepest condolences through you to Lady Williams, all of the children, grandchildren, all of the family members, extended family members, all of those who were loved by Sir Daniel and who loved him. I extend deepest condolences to you at this time. As I sat and reflected on the period of time that I've known Sir Daniel, I agree with our Leader of His Majesty's Opposition that the motion does capture the true essence of who he was, but in a very concise way. There's so much that could be shared. But this morning, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, I recall the 3rd of December, 2003. It was the very first time I had a very close-up personal engagement with Sir Danny. It was the day that he presented to me instrument of appointment in my role as member of the Senate and as a member of the government. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, it was a very historical moment for me. And I recall, I was about 28 at the time, I recall after the ceremony, standing, speaking to family and friends, and I noticed the Governor General walking across in my direction. I could not believe it because, of course, your perception of the Governor General at that time, you never thought he would be coming to you. And he came across and he stood next to me and he whispered, almost sounded like a song, just remain humble and focused. I never forgot those words. Just remain humble and focused. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, those words stayed with me throughout the years. And so this morning, as we reflect, as we think about his many years of service, an exceptional leader, outstanding statesman, he has served and he has served us so well. Again, strength and grace to his family. But as I reflected, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, there are 3 things that stood out to me that has inspired me over the years that have known this great man. And I believe the first one for me is love for family. So we have established, we know the contribution that he has made in his role of leadership in this country. But I'm saying that in addition to that, there are three things that have inspired me over the years that still resonate so deeply for me personally that I wish to share this morning. First, his love for family. I don't recall a conversation with Sir Danny, whatever the subject matter, without him creating an opportunity to speak about his family, his dear wife and children. But what is interesting, because we can share how we feel about other people, but interestingly, when you speak to his family, you get the exact same thing coming back. The love, the respect that they shared. So it was mutual, and that I have admired over the years. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, the second thing that for me has been very touching, very inspiring, his humility and love for people. Particularly, I want to zero in on the poor and vulnerable. Sir Danny had a heart for people in need. I'm sure his inspiration of the foundation and so many other things that he did in the community traced right back to a heart for people. I've admired that. His willingness to give, to contribute, to be on the ground, as we would say, activities, particularly in St. David. His involvement in community regardless of the level of the position that he held. To me, that has been an inspiration. But I remember a conversation with Sir Danny where he shared his experience, and I would never forget that. His experience of the passage of Hurricane Ivan. I sat there and I listened to him, and the trauma and everything else that he shared was overshadowed for me by the humility that came forth when he spoke about his journey from the Governor General's residence to his house in St. David, walking. And he said, climbing over the telephone poles. I mean, I could just imagine the trauma. But as I said, for me, what stood out was the humility. And he spoke about his experience of encountering so many people on the way. Madam Speaker, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, for me, those are the things that stands out. The third thing of the third, Madam Speaker, Mr. President, for me, is how Sir Danny responded to the most vicious attacks on his character. For me, what I saw was someone of great faith in God. Somebody who understood that through it all, I learned to trust in Jesus. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you very much, Honorable MP for St. Andrew South East. I now turn over to Madam President.
There's one more. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Honorable. Sorry, I don't know why I missed you. It's now your turn. The floor is now yours, Honorable MP, for the South.
Special good morning to everyone. Mr. Speaker, let me just start by saying this. The uniqueness of the name Danny Williams, Sir Danny Williams, and as a little boy, what it meant to me. When I was growing up, hearing the name, it was a merger between myself and my brother, because my brother's name was Danny Clark, and my name was Andy Williams. So when I heard the name Danny Williams, it always had that special place with me saying, you know, it's myself and my brother, Danny Williams. But Mr. Speaker, let me just, I'll be short. And Mr. Speaker, from life, I try to take lessons from life. And I'm sitting here hearing everything about Sir Danny Williams and the wonderful person he was. Mr. Speaker, I also want to give credit to his family, because being a parliamentarian, politician, Governor General is not an easy task. And Mr. Speaker, sometimes you are putting your family in a situation where they feel uncomfortable, they feel saddened at times, and even your time with them may be limited. And Mr. Speaker, as we gather here today, Madam President, you know, the lessons I'm getting from this is that at the end of it all, who do we have with us? Family. Family. So I want to urge, Mr. Speaker, everyone here today, and everyone listening, that in our busy schedule, in our lives as politicians, parliamentarians, do not take our family for granted. Love our family, spend time with them, comfort them, because at the end of it all, that is who will stand with us and stand by us. So I say today, Mr. Speaker, my condolences to the family of Sir Danny Williams. And I do not know him personally, but from what I've heard today, I can tell he was a great man. And I think you are privileged to have a man like this to be a husband, a father, and a grandfather to all of the family. So I want to say thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable MP. I now finally turn over to the President.
Thank you. I don't know if it's appropriate to say colleague, co-chair, and comrade. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable members of the Senate, your moment has arrived, and I offer the floor first to Senator, the Honorable David Andrew. You have the floor, Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to associate myself with the sentiments of the motion as presented. Indeed, with your leave, I'd like to express deepest condolences to Lady Williams, the children of late Sir Danny Williams, his surviving relatives, and all who cared about him. I pray for God's grace and God's strength to all of them as they cope and manage in what obviously would be a difficult period. When you live and you get immersed in a family and you get accustomed to having someone share that space with you, it's always going to be difficult when that time comes when you have to part with them. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, the motion speaks of Sir Danny's involvement as a representative in 1984. I was still a primary school student at that time. But then several years later, when I became a secondary school teacher, by then he was Governor General. And I had to teach my students, and I had to make sure my students became aware of who the then Governor General was. And so I've been following him since then. But since that time, 1984, up to this year, and very recently, I know that Sir Danny Williams has been involved in service at various levels, from parliamentary representative
Governor General, community activist, and you've heard it from persons who probably know him a lot better than I do. But I have had the privilege, while I served as a counseling supervisor for the District of St. David, I had the privilege of meeting him on several occasions, because often I'll be in the graduation of several of the schools in St. David's. And I remember on a couple of occasions, and one in particular, meeting him in a graduation at the St. David RC School. And we had very cordial exchanges. A gentleman who is indeed a genuine person, a genuine human being, very soft-spoken and very profound. And so Danny has genuinely contributed. He has genuinely served. We can say that he has lived. You see, several times people come, they probably exist on the planet for several decades sometimes, and they can't find a reason why they have done so. I don't think that's the case for Sir Danny. He has truly contributed in every sense. And so I thank God that his family were able to partner with God to loan him to Grenada in the service of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. And so I thank you, Lady Williams. I thank you, family. And we pray that God will continue to strengthen each of you as you continue in this period. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Andrew. Thank you. Senator Andre Lewis, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I stand here on behalf of Labour to extend our deepest condolences to Lady Williams and her family and all those who have been closely associated with Sir Daniel. We are very grateful for his contributions, and we do wish you all the very best. In a way, and probably more than a way, there is continuity. There's continuity in terms of his legal profession, because the Williams legal law firm continues. And as I said, on behalf of the workers, we wish you continued memories of him. I also beg the understanding of the House. I must take my departure because one of our comrades who have given human service to the Grenada Airports Authority as a Met officer and also as a member of the Technical and Allied Workers Union Management Committee has been buried today in the north of the island. That's Comrade Martin Moore, and I'm due to represent the union there. So I crave your understanding, Lady Williams and family, and everyone, that on my departure, it has to do with performing and recognizing the role and contributions of our Grenadian brothers and sisters. So I thank you very much. And on behalf of the workers, once again, condolences to the families and friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Lewis. To the front lines you go, you see. Senator, the Honorable Claudette Joseph, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Speaker. Madam President, I too, like the speakers before me, rise to associate myself with the sentiments as so eloquently expressed in the motion before this Honorable House. And likewise, I first extend sincerest condolences to the family of Sir Daniel, Lady Gloria, Dawn, Pauline, Daniela, the grandchildren, the extended family. And These condolences are coming, as my colleagues have already done and will continue to do, on behalf of the government and people of Grenada, but also on my own behalf and on behalf of the members of the legal profession in Grenada. So Daniel is a name that I grew up knowing, associating him with those patriotic sons and daughters who stepped forward during the tragic events of 1983 to be part of the restoration of constitutional democracy in Grenada. And I always remember Sir Daniel as being the MP for the constituency of St. David. Because as young people just coming out of the revolutionary experience, barely a teenager, but very keenly following the politics of the time. And from that moment on, Sir Daniel, to me, displayed what a great patriot he was, a public servant, a community man, an outstanding lawyer, and a humble servant of God. And I would just endorse all that has been said so far. But to highlight that as a member of the legal profession, Sir Daniel was very supportive and encouraging of young lawyers. He had this very humble way about him, even though he was a senior lawyer. So that while I was a young and maybe hot and sweaty lawyer and the deputy registrar of the court, you know, you come out and you think you know everything. So Daniel was one of those senior lawyers who would come very quietly and humbly at the registry and correct and school me in the most, well, it's only after he got up and left I realized I was being schooled. Because I probably would have been holding up one of his probate applications or something, and he would come very humbly and nicely and have me take out my probate text, Tristram and quotes, and show me exactly where I am wrong and that I should proceed with his application. And so we developed a very good rapport. When I decided to enter into private practice, he again came and had some very encouraging words to say to me, and of course offered that I could reach out to him at any time I needed in private practice. He explained that private practice is a tough field, but having interacted with me at the registry, he knew I could manage. And what a lot of people didn't mention today is that Sir Daniel was an author as well. He, in every sphere of life, he contributed intellectually by writing. And when I became a lawyer in private practice, he brought this little book, giving me the little pep talk and encouraging me, and he gave me this little book, God Speaks. That was one of the books he wrote. And in that book contains anecdotes and stories to show the reader how, in everyday life, with the things and people around them, nature, and inspiring people and so, the Lord speaks to you through all the wonderful things he's created. And so as a community man and as a Christian, he wrote these books. He also when he was minister as a public servant of the people, he wrote again a synoptic view of the public service of Grenada in 1999, prescription for a model Grenada in 2000, government and the global village in 2007. He never stopped writing. So that was based on his experience as a minister of government. And of course, he held various ministerial portfolios actually in the short time that he was in the lower house and a member of the cabinet, including acting at times as the Attorney General and at least at one occasion as acting Prime Minister. So Sir Daniel saw it all and served in all these capacities. When he became Governor General, he wrote a booklet on the office and duties of the Governor General. And then as a lawyer, he wrote a little book for the layman, always thinking of people, the Layman's Law Book. This was in 2002. And also an index of the laws of Grenada from 1959 to 1979, a compendium of the laws of Grenada in 1985, and this one is published internationally by the University of Virginia. So Sir Daniel, I almost say Dr. Williams, Sir Daniel wrote and contributed to the jurisprudence and to the intellectual space in which he operated. And I can tell you, when he became Governor General of Grenada, it was indeed a blessing for those of us in the Bar Association. I remember us, at the time I was on the executive of the Bar Association, and we always struggled when we had activities to find locations to host the activities. Well, from the time Sir Daniel became GG, his place became our place. And as far as he was concerned, the Governor General's residence was the people's residence. So he hosted us there on many occasions. And after Ivan, when the Governor General's residence became his private residence at St. David's, almost every activity the Bar Association needed to host, Sir Daniel's place was the location. And so his family actually became an extension, beyond Dawn and Daniela, became an extension of the Grenada Bar Association. And for me, as a young lawyer who didn't have much partying days, part of my enjoyment in attending these occasions was to sometimes sit on the sideline and watch Sir Daniel and Lady Williams take it away. They were quite a sight to behold as dancing partners. And so we remember fondly this great statesman, this son of the soil, this man who left his mark in every sphere that he served, whether it's church, community, public service, or the legal profession. And we say thank you to the Williams family for loaning Sir Daniel to us, and may his soul rest in eternal peace with his God that he so diligently served. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. Senator, the Honorable Gloria Thomas. I think I saw Senator Thomas's light first. I could rotate. Are you all right there? Senator Horsford, waiting a minute? Thank you. Thank you, sir. Proceed, Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Speaker.
Today we gather here to reflect on the life and times of Sir Daniel Williams, former Governor General of Grenada. Let me take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt condolences to Lady Gloria, Dawn, and the rest of the family. We know it is a difficult moment, not only for the family, but his close associate, and we trust that God will give the comfort that is necessary at this time. So Daniel served as Governor General from 1996 to 2008, but contributed to this country's development as a member of parliament and a lawyer. His contributions are well documented and serve as a source of inspiration for all of us, as well as generations to come. Despite being of a quiet disposition, he was able to make positive impression on those whom he interacted and worked with. Sir Danny has a long and distinguished career of service to Grenada. He was a philanthropist, and that is the way I best know him. I got to know him in this way through the Lions Club, working to improve the lives of the less fortunate here in Grenada. He made his contribution and allowed the use of his residence for the annual Lions Pullman dinner. And the Pullman dinner was $100. And this was since in the late 90s to the early 200s. So $100 30 years ago, you could well imagine that was a real sizable fundraising activity. And so, as we continue to reflect on his service and his life, I think it is an inspiration for all of us. We don't have to make a lot of noise to get things done. And we could be humble and still achieve a lot. Today also, we pause to pay respect to Honorable Clarence Rapier and Honorable Allen Maguire, who served this country and sat in these hollow walls, making decisions in the interest of our country. May their legacy be remembered and serve as an inspiration to us all as we continue to serve. May they all find perfect rest as the soul continue to rest in peace. Amen.
Thank you, Senator Gloria Thomas. And I offer the floor to Senator the Honorable Dwight Horsford. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Speaker. Mindful of certain respectful and mournful activities later today, I see many of my colleagues going in that direction. I will be very brief, but I am moved to speak and to join in the chorus of commendation for the life of a faithful and distinguished son of the soil. I believe, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, it was the Greeks who long recognized as true that what echoes in time is what men do in this life that change the course of history. And though today we reflect on Sir Danny's life and contribution to this nation, what I'm about to say is something of my own observation and reflection, and that what we do today is hardly enough. Sir Danny belongs to a generation of special Grenadians that changed the course of history. Earlier on, distinguished speakers, I believe it was the leader of the opposition, Prime Minister and others, mentioned his quiet and humble contribution and participation in the restoration of democratic rule to a traumatized and broken nation. But that contribution is more profound than that, in that we are here today, and a different generation of leaders are here today in a parliament and in these proceedings, precisely because of the contribution of men like Sudani and others. I say so, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, because this generation of special Grenadians are not going to be with us for very long yet. It is the natural order of things that Papa God will call them home, and as we have been seeing, they are going home. And not enough is written about their contribution. We celebrate 50 years of independence, and much of our preoccupation and reflection are about two tumultuous events and periods of our nation's life: independence, revolution, and the collapse thereof. Not much, dishonorably not much, is said, spoken, and written about those who rose to the occasion and the time to pick the country up and put it back together, some of whom are in this parliament today, not necessarily as members, but in the gallery as witnesses. And so, as we reflect on Sudani and his life, I say these things so that our memory and our reflections must come full circle to a broader view of his contribution and those of his ilk. And I too join with my colleagues and a grateful and mournful nation to thank him and his family for his service, his contribution to our nation, and the very benefits of our parliamentary and democratic experience that we now enjoy. And so those were the few words I wish to add, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, on this solemn occasion, because I thought it important that things are put in perspective, in my humble view, regarding such great men as Sudani. And perhaps now too is the occasion for us to honor those of that generation who are still with us for their contributions in a meaningful way. So thank you, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, for affording me this opportunity to say these things.
Thank you, Senator Horsford, for your maiden address, at least to the joint houses, and we will have your maiden Senate statement. I offer the floor to Senator Honorable Seville Francis. You have the floor, Madam.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Madam President, this afternoon. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, members of this honorable house, family, friends, well-wishers of the former Governor General, Sir Danny Williams, allow me to associate myself with the sentiments of those expressed before as we gather here today to eulogize and celebrate the life of Sir Danny Williams. So to the family, I offer my condolences and also to thank you on his behalf for the contributions that he has made to this great nation. I know I am probably the youngest here, and you're wondering, what do you know about Sir Danny Williams? But my fondest memories, and I think I've shared that before in this honorable house, my mother carried me to almost every state function, literally dragged me when I probably did not want to go. But as I look back and I remember attending those events, one of the things that stood out to me is the grace that Sir Danny Williams exuded as he carried out his functions at state events. That calm, graceful demeanor that he displayed is something that I hope to embody and emulate as I carry out my functions in this role, serving this great nation. One of the resonated words that, for me, in this house this morning was legacy. And we speak of his legacy, but one of the things is his foundation, the one that speaks to helping the less fortunate, needy people, children who he wished they had a better life at attaining education. And so that is something that is forever going to remain with me, simply because myself, as a young lady in this society, recently launched a foundation that seeks to help the less fortunate, especially when it comes to attaining their education. And so for me, I may not be able to match the character of the man who we celebrate today, but I hope to walk in these shoes or follow in his footsteps to create that impact that is so needed here in this great nation. And his giving spirit or character was one of the things mentioned here this morning. And I can also attest to that being part of an organization, Friends of the Mentally Ill, and I always hear the names Lady Williams, Sir Danny Williams, as one of the main sponsors for the events that we hold. And also on behalf of the Friends of the Mentally Ill, allow me to place on records my condolences and thank you so much for the contributions that you've made for persons affected by mental challenges in this great nation. And just a couple days ago, I laid my grandmother to rest. And I recall on my journey back to Grenada, this scripture, 1 Corinthians 15, 55 to 57, played on my mind as the tears bathed me from her home to the airport back to Grenada. And this morning, Lady Williams and the rest of the family, I want to share that with you because I too look forward one day to see, O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks to God, which giveth us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you kindly. I offer the floor to His Excellent, to Senator Salim Rahman. Senator Rahman.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to begin by mentioning that I have learned a lot about Sir Danny Williams in this discourse today, in this sharing of information on the life of a great Grenadian. And to say that, as I reflect, we don't honor our elders in the way that we ought to. A lot of time is spent on the airwaves on trivial things, some of them politics, some of them important, a lot of them not. And we don't see enough storytellers telling the stories that we have heard today. I have been fortunate to meet Sir Danny Williams as a customer of mine, and as a young man growing up, observing him in his various roles. And the thing that stood out to me about him was his character. You can learn a lot about a man by the way he speaks and by the way he carries himself. So a lot has been said about him and the way he lived his life. And I'm sure that that has had an effect and will have a continued effect on his family and his grandchildren and those who knew him. But looking forward, in the Islamic tradition, we are taught that when a man dies, that three things continue. His good deeds come to an end when he dies, but three things continue to bring good deeds on his account. One is called Sadaqatul Jariyah, which is charity, unending charity. So if someone were to plant a tree and somebody were to eat from the fruits of that tree, the person who planted the tree would continually get reward. So in this way, the tree that Sir Daniel planted is his contribution to our democracy. For many, many years, through his politics and through his leadership as Governor General. And so it strengthened our democracy, and we heard about it after times of difficulty in our nation. And that tree is still bearing fruit. And so that is partly to his account. Second is knowledge that he would have imparted, that the people act upon after his death. And clearly we have heard today from our Attorney General and others, knowledge that he had imparted to other youngsters, and they have continued to benefit from it today. And third, our children who he leaves behind, family who he leaves behind, who will pray for him and ask God Almighty to continually bless him for what he has provided for them. And so, as I listened, that teaching came to mind, and I wanted to share it because it is not always about the past. We can make our future by how we live today. And it's a lesson for me, and it is a lesson for all of us as leaders, how we conduct ourselves in private and in public, so that we too can have a lasting legacy. I offer sincere condolences to you, Lady Williams,
and your family, and God's continuous blessings. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Amen.
I thank you, Senator Rahman, and I offer the floor to you, Senator Roderick Sinclair. Have the floor, Senator.
Thank you, Madam President, and of course I recognize the Speaker and of course other members of the both houses, of course the audience inside and outside. But most of all, Madam President, for the purpose which we are here today, pertaining to the motion recognizing Sir Danny Williams as a noble statesman who has contributed and recognizing his effort, I would say, on earth. I want to associate myself also with the motion as was presented in this house, in the houses. Of course, as the voice of the farmers and the fisher folks in the Senate, I want to speak here in their voices, of course, with some intonations of my own perspectives. Firstly, to the family, the Williams, the children, grandchildren, of course, the extended family, not only biologically, but based on what I've heard, all those he would have touched, the different groups and so on that would have benefited and would continue to benefit from his generosity. I would have shaken his hand on many occasions, in many functions I would have been at, and the issue of humbleness, calmness, serenity, if that's appropriate word, is very important. And of course, maybe we wonder why he was so calm. You know, when you hear the history and the context of how we get into this extra public life of politics and governance, it was always in times of some turmoil, and the best recipe for dealing in those cases is to keep calm, you know, and it's something that I would say personally will take us through in the time of storm and rough times. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, members, of course, it's my understanding and my knowledge that Sir Williams, of course, is a man deeply rooted with the soil, the earth, his agricultural estates. Of course, I know I've had discussions with his daughter some months ago that she want to get the farm back up and running and so on. So I want to recognize and urge her and the rest of the family that that part of the legacy is in your hands, and we look forward for great outcomes from those. But as I was reflecting, Madam President, to be here this morning, last night I pondered, what do I say? How do I speak? What should I be saying? And three things came to my thoughts. Of course, we hear a lot of three things today, three. But I guess as parliamentarians / politicians, we know today is not a day to be speaking lengthy, so we're keeping it simple. And the message and the purpose for which we're here came to my mind. We are coming here with a special sitting to recognize and to pay homage to a great statesman. But the question arises, well, why? Why are we doing this? What is the purpose? What we hope to achieve at the end of the day? And I battled my way coming here this morning, trying to get some clarity. And whilst I came up with some broad context. When I listened to many of the presentations, they came down to three things. And there's one additional quote I'm going to finish this presentation with. One, to me, to be recognized in such contexts as we are doing today, you have to be deeply rooted in God. It starts there, the Maker. Without God, without connection with the Maker, for whom get you here, for whom give you the energy, the strength, the inspirations, you can get no way further. And so when I listen, that came out very clearly. Not only in Sadani's attendance to service, he wrote, God speaks. I was shocked. So I was actually on point with that. The other thing that came out, Madam President, as the second point, and the second point, in that order, is the issue of serving your country. Outside of God, there is no greater thing that could happen to anyone to serve your country, whether it's military, sports, politics. To serve your country is that you are representing your country to the world, like the Kirani James and all the others great ones. Whether you are successful or not, that's a different discussion. The first issue is to serve. And to serve, well, you, and I think I could borrow it, Senator, Member Andy, you have to have your belly to serve. You have to, it's not easy to stand up in front of people, to the whole world, the whole country is behind you. You have to have the confidence. But as my good friend Senator Rahman mentioned, you have to have knowledge. As Member Lennox Andrew said on the other side, merit. You have to have capacity. So it is not just about, I want to represent my country. I want to do this. But you have to be prepared. And so we heard Member MP Peter David, speaking about him going to school in the UK to prepare himself. Because if he was not prepared, he would not have been able to reach those heights. And so, being a statesman, and we sit here to honor, is that we have to be prepared in all ways to excel, such that in whatever we do, we can be able to leave footprints in the sand or indelible marks or however we want to refer to them. And I say this, Madam President, these 2 points, and I'll get to the third one shortly, is not only for us, what we represent here, but there are many others, hundreds of thousands, locally and overseas, in other countries too, who would want to aspire and be great leaders, philosophers, persons who they leave legacies behind, persons who would want to create their own mark and leave marks behind. And so there are models, there are ways to do this. And maybe the family would have to write this book, How to Be Great. The examples. Because being great, it doesn't happen by chance. It involves many things, some of which we heard here today. But what we do know is that God is always in the middle of this. It starts there. You have to have capacity and competence. You have to have the urge and the will to want to do. But you also have to be a wise man. And we heard all the wise things. He spoke to Dr. Mitchell. He said, don't go there. Don't leave it alone. The wiseness is very important. in all of this, Madam President, you could have God. You could have all the capacity. But if you have a dysfunctional family, a non-supportive family, and all of those things, and friends, not only direct, immediate family and friends and your network, if it doesn't exist, one and two is in trouble. And so, we have to understand, and we have to be supportive wherever we are to this Lady Williams and the family for giving up, which was rightly said, Sadani to the nation. And maybe in his passing, you may say, well, you are going through a sad moment. But at the same time, they had to be struggling a lot in maybe having times with him. You have to attend to this, different issues, and so on. They had to be tolerant at the same time. They had to be supportive. You have to explain certain things to them that they have to. And so it is not an easy road. Maybe you may say, well, we don't have to worry about that anymore. But you do have to worry about that more. Because as a family, you'll be called upon, trust me, to sort of explain how you did it. How did he do it? Some documentary to create that model of a statesman, a woman. This is what I'm seeing ahead of us. The life of a family, of a politician, is not a simple thing. Especially the competitive politics. Things have been said, you may say, well, no, well, they have it wrong. Well, they could be saying that because you know better. And you wouldn't pick up the radio, they go in the radio and cuss and debate. You have to take calmness. And I say this to say, not only to your family, but all of us, family and friends, we have to be supportive. Because this is what we call the enabling environment. The enabling environment. So you can have a good tomato plant growing nice with all the tomatoes. But if the enabling environment, the weeds and the irrigation and the greenhouse is not around, which is the family, that tomato may not get to the plate. And so, whilst God is important, and whilst all those other things we get into competency is important, the family. But what keeps the family together is also very important. It comes back to our belief in the faith, belief in that this person can do it, that push. The cheers that we give when, you see our athletes running and jumping or getting the ball and you say, yeah, go for it. The cheerleaders. And so I ask you, the family, at the same time, to find new persons to cheer for. There are many other persons who are looking for support. We are not asking you to adopt everybody, but there are others that in your own way that we can help and share and keep the legacy. Whilst I don't want to say, may his soul rest in peace, I would say that his life will continue. His readings, his writings, all of those things. The Bible was written many years ago, and is still alive. How many of us have written a book? Written something that someone can read 40 years from now, 70 years from now. The wise people do this thing, because they know that someday those will be helpful And so I want to just read, finally. I don't like reading and referencing things, but I like to have my own reference. But I thought this might be helpful in the context of all that was discussed by one William James. I don't know who this person is, but it's on the internet. Unless you Google everything. It says, the greatest use of life, the use of life, just understand the use of life, what we do, is to spend it, so it's a currency, yeah? To spend it on something that will outlast it. And with these last words, I want to extend to you the greatest sympathy, the greatest support. Be strong, very strong. I've lost my wife about a month ago, so I understand your loss right now. Okay? Thank you.
I thank you, Senator Sinclair. And I offer the floor for her maiden statement, Senator the Honorable Mariana Charles. Dr. Charles.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the motion to celebrate the life of His Excellency, Sir Daniel Williams. I extend my deepest condolences to Lady Williams, the children, grandchildren, relatives, and friends of Sir Daniel Williams. Though I may not know Sir Daniel Williams personally, from the sentiments shared here today, it is evident that his unwavering service and significant contribution to our nation have left an indelible mark on our hearts and in our history. We are profoundly grateful for his selfless service and a legacy which will continue to inspire us all, myself included. So again, thank you, and may his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you, Madam President.
Well, we thank you, Senator Charles, for your words and at this late hour for your considerable brevity. Thank you. Thank you, Senator. I offer the floor to Senator Quince Britton. Senator Britton, you have the floor, sir.
Afternoon, Madam President, Mr. Speaker. I too join to stand here to associate myself with the sentiments expressed in the motion presented or read by Honorable Prime Minister. Madam President, I beg your indulgence to express our profound and sincerest condolences to the family. On behalf of the government and people of Grenada, and particularly the people of St. Mark, we say our deepest condolences to you. Though I too didn't have any personal encounter with Sir Danny, but with the many sentiments that has been expressed here today, without a shadow of a doubt, Sir Danny has left an indelible mark in the many lives of our citizens of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique through his exemplary services at various levels. To you, I say thank you for lending him us to serve us as an esteemed gentleman. Though he's gone, he would never be forgotten. And may the many wonderful memories that he shared bring comfort to every soul that grieves. May his soul rest in perfect peace.
I thank the Honorable Senator Prince Britton, and I believe this summarizes or concludes the statements. May I take leave to offer very brief remarks? Gloria, Lady Williams, please permit me to add my voice in saluting your dearly departed husband, beloved Sir Daniel Williams, a statesman who worked in the public square. Among his many books, the one entitled The Layman's Law Book contributes immensely to the wellspring of the legal knowledge of our civil society and our nation, indeed Grenada as a whole. His life is a reflection of the many formidable undertakings of service, and his life does reflect his heartfelt commitment to Grenada. Gloria, Lady Williams, on behalf of my mother, who was a strong friend of the family, and on my own behalf, and clearly on behalf of this Senate, I too express sincere condolences to you, your family, and relatives on the sad passing of Grenada's attorney, Grenada's former Minister of Government, and Grenada's former Governor General of the years 1996 to 2008. As this distinguished House has acknowledged throughout the morning, here in your gracious presence, Madam, your departed spouse was a distinguished son of the soil, and his life was one of formidable undertakings, anchored in community. If I were to summarize it, I would say that his work fits within the complex intersection of law, family and community life, and national politics, all of which contributed to Grenada's national development. Sir Daniel Williams provided wise leadership and courageous action, calm as it was already said, wise as it was already said, and deliberate, and as has already been said, very relevant in every era, in every time that he served. And thus, in a long and fruitful life, this intersection undertook many forms: Children's Foundation, commitment to church, law firm, successful daughters and family, a published author, an entrepreneur, a farmer, a partner, and of course a parent. We as a people are indeed indebted to this eminently humane and qualified gentleman. The Honorable Prime Minister of Grenada, Deacon Mitchell, said that Sir Daniel Williams planted a tree under which many others could find shade. And when I heard that summary, I thought, and the tributes that followed, I thought this is indeed what the man was all about. In that complex of being a human being, being a parent, being a public official, he was planting, he was opening up spaces for others. And if you didn't want to, you did not have to interact. But it has struck me how interesting it is, how meaningful it has been that persons from different generations, different political persuasions, different fields of interaction have all been able to find shade under the tree of Sir Daniel Williams. And thus he lived. He lived because he served. He served God, family, and country. And he served as a way, indeed, as his way to live. I thank you, and I ask God's continued blessing on the family and mercy on his soul.
Honorable members, I too must join my voice with the sentiments expressed before. Having listened to everything that was said, it's clear in my mind that Sir Danny did a lot more than we realize as individuals. When you add the sum total of the contributions today, you get a better sense of who the gentleman really was. I don't know what his childhood dream was, but to serve as GG, as Governor General, it's the highest office that anyone can serve. So as simple and as humble as he was, he managed to attain the highest office of the state. That is really commendable. And if there is a reason to be hopeful and cheerful, is that Sir Danny rose, I'm not sure which part of St. David's, but rose from wherever he was born to sit in the highest office. I didn't know much of the gentleman. Many years ago, he called me when I worked at the Ministry of Education and said to me that he wanted to open, he called it a resource center, somewhere not far from Honorable Prime Minister, St. David's Pharmacy, somewhere along this road, this line there. He showed me an area that he wanted to open a resource center. And I went with him, I looked at the place because he talked about computers and books and the like. So I accompanied the gentleman. And I asked myself then, I wonder why is he into this? You know, is there more that you can do for yourself? But he seemed to be focused on something. I almost could have heard him thinking. Then I stepped back and said to myself, Sir Danny feel that he must do more for the people he knew. And so that resource center, without even asking him, came to me as a way of providing an opportunity for the lesser among him to be able to access education and resources to change their own situation. So the sum total of everything that was said today comes forcefully to mind that the way Sir Danny lived his life, there must be a place up there for him. Thank you. After
Who is, she's...
Honorable Prime Minister. Schools.
Madam President, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank all of the members who have expressed their sentiments in supporting the motion and who have personally expressed their condolences, sympathy, and their tributes to Sir Daniel and Sir Daniel's family. It is not often that we get the honor of paying tribute to someone who has held the highest office in the land, simply because of the rare distinction that such offices bring. It is also not commonplace for persons to hold such offices. If I'm not mistaken, so Daniel's passing signifies that we do not, in fact, have any former Governor Generals who are now alive. And so, as my learned friend, Mr. Osford, indicated, such men and the era that Sir Daniel represented perhaps has come to an end. And so it is now up to us to continue in the high standards of the service to the public that he has set. And so being given the opportunity to pay tribute to him in this motion simply represents an opportunity for all of us to be reminded, as difficult as it is and as much belly as you need, it is service over self that leads to gratification and that personifies the purpose for the existence of human beings. So I commend all of the members at this joint sitting for joining in paying tribute to Sir Daniel. And I thank you, Madam President and Mr. Speaker, the clerk and the members, the support staff at Parliament for giving us the opportunity to do so. And lastly, for Sir Daniel's family, friends, well-wishers, and supporters for taking time off from your busy schedule and spending the better part of almost 3 hours with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister, for your closing remarks. And now, honorable members of the House of Representatives, the question proposed is, now therefore be it resolved that this special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament held at Mount Wheldale, St. George, this 15th day of October 2024, hereby recognize the substantial contribution made by His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams as a resolute Governor General and an exemplar of erudite principles respected and acknowledged throughout Grenada, regionally and extra-regionally, and be it further resolved that the special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament of Grenada express profound sympathy to the family, relatives, and friends of His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams, and honor him for his humbled and distinguished service to the state of Grenada. All those who are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those who oppose, say no. The ayes have it. Indeed, the ayes have it.
Honorable members of the Senate, the question proposed is, now therefore be it resolved that this special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament at Mount Wheldale, St. George's, this 15th day of October 2024, hereby recognize the substantial contributions that have been made by His Excellency Sir Daniel Williams as a resolute Governor General and as an exemplar of erudite principles respected and acknowledged throughout Grenada, regionally and extra-regionally. And be it further resolved that, honorable members, the special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament of Grenada express profound thanks and sympathy to the family, to the relatives, and the friends of Sir Daniel.
Take the call. All those in favor?
Yes. And therefore, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. And those opposed, say nay. Of course, the ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. And we move for other matters. I join with others in indicating that I will submit into the record a statement concerning the former Senator Alan Maguire, who has also passed. His statement will be in the record.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that these honorable houses be adjourned sine die.
MP for St. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam President, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support the motion as presented by the Leader of Government Business.
For this, Senator Andrew David.
Madam President, I beg to associate the Senate with the sentiments of the motion as moved by the Leader of Government Business. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. For the opposition in the Senate, Senator Dwight Horsford.
Madam President, I second the motion as accepted by the Leader of Government's Business.
Honorable members of the House of Representatives, the motion is that the House of Representatives be adjourned sine die. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Indeed, the ayes have it.
Again, we thank distinguished family members of Sir Danny for being with us this morning. All members of the Senate in support of the motion that the Senate be adjourned, sine die. Say aye. And those who are opposed, say nay. The ayes have it.
Honorable members of the House of Representatives, this
No.
Honorable members from the House of Representatives, this honorable House now stands adjourned sine die.
Honorable Senators, this Senate, these houses stand adjourned sine die.
Sorry.
Paul.
Mr. Speaker, Madam President, I beg your indulgence.
Go ahead, Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, and might I be so presumptuous as to ask, Madam Speaker, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, whether I would be permitted to invite the family of the late Sir Williams to dine with us for lunch.
So be it, Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you.
We don't need a motion for that.
This honorable House now stands adjourned.